Greetings, everyone. Today, I'm bringing you a very special program. As one goes through life, one meets certain individuals that stand out and make a lasting impression on you. And in this particular case, not only a lasting impression on myself, but also on healthcare providers everywhere. And in particular, meeting this man and listening to his message changed my practice forever in terms of compassion and consideration for patients, especially those patients that had illnesses that I couldn't easily fix or maybe couldn't fix at all. Who I'm talking about is Marcus Engel. He is a certified speaking professor and author whose messages provide insight and strategies for excellent patient care. His keynote presentation, The Other End of the Stethoscope, has been witnessed by tens of thousands of healthcare professionals, and his books are used in scores of nursing and allied health programs to teach the basic foundations of caregiving. As a college freshman, Marcus Engel was blinded and nearly killed after being struck by a drunk driver. Through 2 years of rehab, over 350 hours of reconstructive facial surgery, and adaptation through a multitude of life changes, Marcus witnessed the good, the bad, and the profound in medical care. Marcus has authored 4 books. He holds a BS in sociology from Missouri State University and an MS in narrative medicine from Columbia University in the city of New York. In 2017, Marcus was awarded the honorary doctorate from the Philadelphia College of Osteopathic Medicine and is currently an adjunct professor at the University of Notre Dame, where he teaches pre-meds the art of being with. Marcus lives in Florida with his wife, Marveline, and his seeing eye dog, James. Marcus, it's a real pleasure to have you come and speak to our audience, and welcome.
Well, thank you, Dr. Caprini, and thank you for this opportunity. Also, thank you for being a guest recently on my podcast, Compassion and Courage, and for sharing your insights with a lot of other people that way too. Thank you.
It's my pleasure. So, Marcus, tell us about your accident. And there's 2 features that I want you to emphasize in the beginning of your story. One, who was with you the first night? And also, take us up to the point where the doctors tried to save your eyes.
Okay, so if you're watching this on video, the reason I'm wearing sunglasses is because that was blindness that was caused by a motor vehicle accident when I was a 18-year-old college freshman. My friends and I got broadsided by a drunk driver on our way home from a St. Louis Blues hockey game. And that crash not only took 100% of my sight instantaneously and permanently and totally, but it also crushed every bone in my face. And so I don't remember much of the experience that first night in the hospital, but what I do remember was a female holding my hand. And every time she could tell that I was conscious, she would say to me, Marcus, my name is Jennifer. You're in the hospital. You were in a car accident. And it was just really brief little bits of information. But what she said that gave me so much security and hope that first night in the emergency room was she would repeat what I say are the 2 most compassionate words that we can say to any other human beings. And those words are, I'm here. And as she held my hand, she just kept saying, Marcus, I'm here. I'm here. And I didn't even know where here was, but I knew that I was not alone. And that human presence is what I teach across the country these days. s- somehow I survived that first night in the emergency room. And whenever I say that life was hanging by a thread, I got a crike in the field, and that was just the beginning of what was a long road to recovery. You asked about the doctors that first had to tell me that I was going to be blind, and when they came into the room and told me this information, that they had done surgery, that they had tried their best, but there was nothing else that they could do, I had a really um, a reaction that I look back on now with a totally different perspective. In that moment, I didn't have anyone else to blame, and so these docs were right there beside my bed, and I would angrily write to them things like, "How can you even call yourself a doctor? How can you even look at yourself in the mirror if you can't fix me? If you can't fix my blindness?" And with these surgeons, the last thing I remember was writing to them really dark across this page, because again, I'm on a trach at this time. I've got on a ventilator, and writing out that I hate you, I hate you. And I think back on those times now with age and wisdom and a lot of counseling and therapy. I came to know this thing that I try to base my life on, which is that hurting people hurt people, hurting people hurt people. And I lashed out at those surgeons, telling them I hated them, but I didn't have anybody else to blame. And I went into fight or flight at that moment, and I have to imagine that those surgeons understood that that was a normal reaction from an incredibly hurt individual.
So, Marcus, and I would like to tell the audience how I met Marcus. Was we were at a medical conference, and Marcus was giving a keynote lecture to us about compassion and caring. And he started it out and introduced it by this story. And he asked a funny question at the beginning. I don't remember what the question was. He said, "Everybody that's experienced this, raise your hands." And then he said, "Do you realize you're just raising your hands to a blind person?"
Yeah.
So but that was a very important thing, because it diffused the audience. They were expecting
Mhm.
this very somber speech, and he started off, if you will, by telling kind of a funny joke.
Mhm.
And then as I'm sitting there and I'm listening to this, I am a blood clot specialist, and after many, many years, I can't tell you the number of times I've been so frustrated in the office because I've had to tell people that I couldn't do anything for them. And sometimes they were very angry with me and said, "Well, how could you call yourself a specialist and you're supposed to be? I waited a month to see you as an expert and you can't even do anything." And so that rang so true with myself and all of us in the audience that we said, "Oh my God, this is really something that's very impactful uh, for us to know, to be able to help our patients." And then what I said to myself is, why in the world wasn't this 18-year-old who had his whole life ahead of him and is obviously very bright? He's now got several degrees and he's an adjunct professor and so forth. His life was sort of trashed by this drunk driver. How did he go from hatred and revenge and anger and frustration to standing there on that podium and lecturing to us, as he's done maybe thousands of times, to help all of us healthcare professionals? So could you expand a little bit on that more for us, Marcus?
Wow. So yeah, I often get that question. It's like, well, how did you turn the page from being bitter and angry and lashing out at these surgeons for something that they couldn't help, you couldn't help? And how do you get past that? There's boy, I think first of all, I have a very wonderful support system. I've got great parents, great family, great church community growing up. and I had so much support. So I almost knew that if I did not keep living the life that was trying to live, a good decent life, productive member of society, that I'm kind of letting down those people who believe so much in me, and those people that were praying for me when I was hospitalized. So I think one of the things though that helped me kind of get to a point of peace was the simple understanding that if I spend my whole life being angry and vengeful and, dare I say, pissed off at the other driver who took my site, how do you, if I spend all of my time being angry and hateful towards him, number one, does it actually hurt him? The answer is no. And number two, who does it hurt? It hurts me, right? It hurts me. And I ultimately made what I think is maybe a selfish decision, or could be viewed as a selfish decision, that look, you did this action that took my sight. I'm not going to give you my future. I'm not going to give you my happiness and my relationships. I'm not going to give you my life. And so I just tried to rebuild as best I could. I'd rather spend my time focusing on that compassion, like Jennifer showed me in the emergency room, and like Barb, my favorite nurse, showed me. I'd rather spend my time there than spend a life being angry and bitter.
Well, that's really very interesting, and I would like to digress at this moment, Marcus, because I very strongly believe in the human spirit, and that our job on this world in this world is to help one another. And if we have our hearts full of hatred, there's no we can't help others, and we can't help ourselves. And I often think of the story. I'm sure most everyone in the world has seen the liberation of Auschwitz. And on that fateful day, there were these two little girls that were at the front of the line, the coming out of Auschwitz. One of the little girls had been operated on by Joseph Mengele and was going to die. And the other little girl was going to be killed as a matching autopsy. But the Allies ruined that plan and liberated the camp. And lo and behold, the one little girl died, but the other little girl grew up, and she came back on the 25th anniversary of Auschwitz and invited everybody that she could, who was the camp guards, anybody involved in the camp who wasn't in prison and around, and she publicly forgave them at Auschwitz. And the other people who had survived this said, "Are you crazy?" And she said, "No, no, not at all. I had nothing to do with this evil and with this hatred. And why would I keep any of that in my heart? And also, who knows why those people did those things and what their motivations were and what happened. And of course, there's a whole history behind it. Leave that to the creator. Leave that to a higher power, or whatever you want to call it. It's not my job." And I'm just going to be full of love and get that out of my heart. And so she went on to give a long career of lecturing to people and trying to get them to get some of that hatred out of their heart, because after all, that was just the most horrible set of circumstances that you could imagine. Now, on my website already, I have a couple of videos of yours, including when you met some of the people that took care of you before. Could you tell us a little about that?
Oh wow! So this is a really cool story that uh, probably, well, it was 20 years, so now it's been 10 years since this event happened. And let me explain that a little further. This year will be the 30th anniversary of that crash, and 10 years ago I was invited to give lectures at Barnes Jewish Hospital, Washington University Med School in St. Louis, and to come in and talk to all of the staff about patient experience, about compassionate communication, about resiliency and overcoming adversity, and the patient's perspective. So it was all these things wrapped into one. And I figured that I would be meeting some people who used to take care of me, because I still actually kept in touch with a few. What I did not know from the moment that I ever interacted with Jennifer in the emergency room, I never knew who she was, never knew her last name or her position in the emergency room, didn't know any of that. And then when I'm back at Barnes lecturing as a professional, there she is. There she is. And as it turns out, she not only remembered me, but she was able to fill in many of the details that I did not remember, and told me her perspective, and she was as surprised to find me, that I was still out there somewhere. And she had no idea that I had written a book based on those words that she said to me in the emergency room. It was just such a beautiful, beautiful reunion, and someone that now I'm honored that I can call my friend.
Well, that's a wonderful story, Marcus. If you would, in a little capsule, give us a synopsis of what you would say. I'm sitting here as a third year medical student and struggling to get through my studies and so on and so forth, just starting to interact with patients. And, one of the things that I've learned at many years of practice is you get a lot of experience, but it comes with a lot of scars. And
Mm.
your discussion to people like, in this case, I'm a budding medical student, was incredibly valuable in helping them shape their career and deal with patients. So could you give us a little synopsis of what you would, I'm this student and you're trying to give us some positive remarks, and if you will, your basic message. I think it'd be very important for the audience to hear some of that.
My basic message is stay present, stay compassionate. And that all goes back to the fact that action that Jennifer did in the emergency room, holding my hand and being present for my time of suffering, that's the foundation of caregiving. That's the foundation of our humanity. And I just want to remind everybody that when we can be present for another person during their suffering, that's the greatest gift we can give another human being. This is the same thing I get to teach to my pre-meds at Notre Dame. I'm a co-instructor of a course that is called the Pathos Project. Officially, it's called Introduction to Personalism in Medicine. And this is run through the Ruth Hillebrand Center for Compassionate Care in Medicine. I get to work with these students on capturing their stories and their narratives, and help them understand how to be present with those patients through all types of those patient reactions, to just remember that it's part of the human condition. We all suffer. And as docs and future docs, let's try to remember that everyone that we come into contact with is suffering, and we get to take care of individuals while they're suffering.
Well, that's a very powerful message. And one of the many reasons why I identified with your whole situation was, first and foremost, it gave me a real eye-opening perspective on how to deal with people and how to comfort them. And my wife has helped me with this too, is sometimes, especially as a surgeon, my kids always said, Dad, you have the 30-second fix. We give you a problem and you tell us in 30 seconds how to fix it. And of course, some of these things that we're involved in are just way beyond any of that. So where my wife comes into this is that she always tried to tell me to put yourself in the other person's shoes, find out where they're coming from. And maybe that person that's being rude to you, maybe they lost a loved one, maybe they just found out they had cancer. And so I would like to sort of jump on top of your messages and also encourage everyone, please don't ever judge anyone. You can not like what they do. even, the most horrible people, the horrible actions by all the people in the Holocaust and so forth. But we have no idea where they were coming from. We have no idea what the motivation was. We don't understand what happened at the end of the First World War, all of those things. So leave all that aside and try to put yourself in that person's shoes and be compassionate toward them. And I think that's also what it means to turn the other cheek. But the other reason that this is so powerful, your message is so powerful, is that my mother and father had a daughter, Patricia. And in 1937, when Patricia underwent a mastoid operation, she died on the table. My parents were devastated, and they decided that instead of revenge, they tried to have another baby, which they eventually did in me. I was born 2 years later, and they turned their revenge and hatred for what happened into trying to bring me up. And I think I've had some measure of success in my career. And my daughter, who's a clinical psychologist, reminded me, Dad, did you ever think that part of the higher power's plan was that your sister had to die because otherwise you would have never been born? Because, the girls talk and they found out my parents weren't really doing anything from any kind of sexual activity after Patricia was born. They just weren't interested. They were fine, but they didn't need any of that. And so I might never have been born to carry out this message that I'm trying to carry out now. And so for all of you out in the audience that have lost loved ones and had bad things happen to you, try to get some compassion in your heart and try to let some of that hatred go, because there's often a greater purpose and greater reason for things that are going on. So, Marcus, did you ever meet the drunk driver?
The only kind of contact that I have ever had with the drunk driver was the day that he was sentenced in court, and that was all a plea bargain deal. We knew what was going to happen before we ever went into court, so it's kind of just a formality. And the only kind of contact that was said, he said, "I'm sorry, I never meant to hurt anybody." And I think he was being very truthful.
Right.
I don't think across the traffic safety perspective and in Mothers Against Drunk Driving, we don't use the term accident, because you don't accidentally get intoxicated. You have to work to do that. You don't accidentally walk out to the car. You don't accidentally stick the key in the ignition. You don't accidentally pull out on the road after drinking. So it's not an accident. It's a crash or a wreck. And yet it was not intentional either. And so for me, it gives me a little bit of peace, I guess, the ability to let some of that go, that it wasn't intentional. But even if it was intentional, I've just had to learn that if I spend all of my time in hatred, it doesn't help. It doesn't get me anywhere I want to be. I want to live a life that's filled with compassion and joy and forgiveness and just human kindness and decency. That's where I want to spend my time.
Well, I just think that that's a great message. And, from a medical perspective, too, there's certain tendencies with certain people and alcoholism and so on and so forth. It's a very complicated process. And people that are wonderful people, my father-in-law was like that. He was a wonderful man, but he was an alcoholic, and, a lot of bad things from that happened. But I think you have to understand that a lot of these are illnesses. And again, I would encourage everybody to seek out Marcus, seek out his books, seek out his messages. If you ever go to a conference and Marcus is going to speak, try to listen to it, because this this is a very powerful message about the nature of human life and how we all are supposed to hold hands with one another and walk through life together. And I would like to thank you so much, Marcus, for taking the time to share all of your experience with us. And I'm sure our audience will be absolutely thrilled to hear your account.
Well, I am so pleased to be with you and to get to chat with you again. Thank you for the opportunity. And if anybody has something that I can help them with, please feel free to reach out at marcusengel.com. Engel is spelled Engel, marcusengel.com. And I'd be happy to help you in any way I can. So thank you all so much. And Dr. Caprini, thank you for all you do. Thank you for the opportunity to chat today.
Yeah, it's been a wonderful experience to get to know you, and I can't tell you how much I've enjoyed this process, and we'll carry forward. Thank you very much, and I hope you have a great weekend and enjoy James, your new seeing eye dog.
Thank you, thank you. He's a pretty great pup, and if folks are ever at medical conferences or conventions and you see a guy with a black lab seeing eye dog, it's probably me. Come up and say hi.
Okay. Thank you very much. Have a great weekend, Marcus.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.